explain.
I hope today's video doesn't lead to any fallout between us. Fallout New Vegas. Hey everybody, Tony here. Today we'll be discussing one of my favorite characters in all of gaming, Joshua Graham. So very excited to finally talk about this character with you. I didn't talk about him in my other Legends Explains videos because he has not yet been a character, but I am super excited. He's my favorite character in Fallout, favorite character in gaming. He's super cool.
I don't enjoy killing, but when done righteously, it's just a chore, like any other.
I built a very cool, mostly standard Isshin deck for him because Isshin's a very known quantity at this point, and he is just a reskin of Isshin to Evans as one, unfortunately. But we're just excited to have him in the game. We're not going to talk about things past the point where we physically meet him in game because it is very likely that we're going to have a Fallout New Vegas remaster soon, and this will be a lot of people's first introduction to Fallout New Vegas, and I want them to have as clean a slate going in as possible. Though I do want you to understand who this character is, so I'm balancing kind of like a tightrope here, you know what I mean? We're going to talk about his history of things that happened before the game, his history with Caesar, and right up until the point where we actually meet him. You deserve a chance to fall in love with this character and his writing in a natural way, and I don't want to take that away from you. But yeah, be sure to like and subscribe, and let's jump into this lore section. And as always, if you're not interested in the lore section, you just want to check out the deck tech, there's a time code down below. Feel free, I will not be offended. Especially today, because I'm sure a lot of you just don't want to be spoiled about this character knowing there is a remake on the horizon. I totally understand.
The rest is history, assuming Edward hasn't changed it.
Joshua Graham has worn many hats throughout his time in the Wasteland. A Mormon missionary, an interpreter, a warlord known as the Malpace Legate, and of course, as depicted on his card, the Burned Man. Joshua Graham was born in New Canaan to a Mormon family, but his story really begins years later when he joins a group known as the Followers of the Apocalypse to help them make the Wasteland better. Graham's specific job was to interpret tribal dialects and study languages. On a mission to the Grand Canyon, Joshua Graham and his two partners from the Followers of the Apocalypse were intercepted by a tribal group known as the Blackfoots in the middle of a war they were having with several other tribes. While interacting with the leader of the Blackfoot tribe, Joshua Graham misinterpreted something the leader of the Blackfoot said and got the groups held as prisoners. One of the members of the Followers, Edward Sallow, was able to utilize his knowledge of wartime tactics and battlefield expertise to take over the Blackfoots and help them win their battle against the other tribes. After that victory, Sallow began calling himself Caesar, and that group he is now in control of, the Legion. Joshua Graham now joins the Legion as a co-founder and Caesar's right-hand man. Now going by the title, the Malpace Legate, Joshua Graham would help Caesar for the next 3 decades either destroy or assimilate all the tribes across Arizona, making Caesar's Legion one of the most powerful groups across the entire wasteland. Graham was a skilled and terrifying leader. The men under his control feared him more than they feared any enemy they came across. Joshua Graham also became known as the man who could not be killed, surviving multiple assassination attempts from the other biggest group in the wasteland, the New California Republic. Eventually, these two groups would come into their first major conflict, known as the Battle of Hoover Dam, and the Legion, led by the Malpace Legate himself, would fall in this encounter. Graham himself would survive the Battle of Hoover Dam and return to Caesar, and I'll let Joshua Graham tell this next part himself because I can't tell it better.
After I failed Caesar and he had me burned alive, thrown into the Grand Canyon, I survived because the fire inside burned brighter than the fire around me. The next morning, I woke up and crawled out of the northern edge of the Grand Canyon, that cursed place. It took me 3 months to reach New Canaan. It was as though the prodigal son had returned. They welcomed me like I had never left.
Unfortunately, Joshua Graham returning home was the worst decision he could have made for his people. Caesar would employ a tribe in the area of New Canaan known as the Whitelegs to attack and destroy Joshua Graham's home to get to him. The Whitelegs attacks would eventually push Joshua Graham and his people far into the Zion Valley, and this is about the point where the DLC begins, so I don't want to spoil any more from here. There is so much more we learn about this internally and externally conflicted man, and I implore you to please go play this game and this DLC, or at least wait for the remaster and then go play it. This is most Fallout fans' favorite character, and you deserve to find out why for yourself. You really, really want to have that experience. The Honest Hearts DLC is not universally loved, but Joshua Graham himself is, and it makes it so worth going through. Alright, we know who Joshua Graham is generally. Let's jump into this deck tech, and once again, it is mostly just an Isshin deck. This is a very known quantity, but I did throw as much of a Fallout spin onto it as I could. This is Joshua Graham, the Burn Man. This is a legendary creature, human samurai, 3/4 for a red, a white, and a black. And Joshua Graham says if attacking will cause an ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So for this deck, we want to throw in a bunch of attack triggers, a bunch of fallout cards. Again, this is going to be mostly a box standard Isshin deck. Isshin is a very soft commander at this point, and I threw as much of a fallout flare on top of that as possible. So this brings us to our first category, which is attack triggers, starting with Kinseer Sentry. This is a new card from Lore and Eclipse. This one wants to pull cards out of our hand and put them onto the battlefield equal to the number of creatures we have attacking, which is great. We're able to sneak some stuff out. Then we got Alesha, who laughs at fate, which is kind of doing the opposite as the last creature, as it wants to pull things out of our graveyard based on how big Alesha is. Then we got Brina the Demagogue, which can very quickly get Alesha bigger, and it can also help us draw some cards, and it takes the heat off of us a little bit. Then we got Commissar Savina Rain. This one causes our opponents to lose a bunch of life when we attack, which is going to be great. Then we got Hammers of Moradin. This is a creature with Myriad, which is an attack trigger, and we'll get 6 of these guys whenever we attack, which is great. They'll all get sacrificed, which some of our creatures want, such as Sephiroth, Fabled Soldier. And if we have Joshua Graham out, we'll be able to double those triggers. So this very likely will flip on the turn that you play it. Then we got Kaisar Legion's Emperor. Of course, we're going to have this. This is one of the best cards in Joshua Graham, or vice versa. But this is card draw, direct damage to your opponent, and it creates some guys for us. It kind of does everything we want to do. Then we got Delina Wild Mage. This can make us just a ton of tokens. Fervent Charge. This is one of my favorite cards in the deck. If we get multiple combats, which is one of the things we'll be able to do in this deck, we can get creatures +8, +12, up to like +16 sometimes. Then we got Aurelia the Law Above. This is going to like drain our opponents a little bit, and it's also going to draw some cards. And finally, in our attack triggers category, we got Atali Primal Storm. One of the best cards in the deck. It's just gonna steal all our opponent's stuff. Next up, we have our card advantage category, and that's gonna start with Esper Sentinel. If you're playing a deck with white, you probably want to play Esper Sentinel if you can. Then we've got Chivalric Alliance. This is an attack trigger enchantment, so we can double up this with our commander. And then we have Audacious Thief. This one's just straight up attack draw card, and that'll also be doubled with our commander. Then we got our extra combat category, starting with probably one of the most important cards in the deck, Aggravated Assault. With some of our cards, we'll be able to get a lot of treasures, and we'll probably be able to activate this as many times as we want. After a while, it'll start being a feedback loop. Then we have All Out Assault. This is an anthem, and it gives us extra combats. Then we've got Battle of Olympus, aka World at War. This will give us an extra combat, and then Rebound on the next turn to give us another extra combat. Then we got Karlach, Fury of Avernus. This is going to give us extra combats, and with our commander, it will trigger to give us extra combats again, but it will not untap again, so that's something to keep in mind. We'll have a couple ways to untap our creatures, or at least give Vigilance, which is gonna help with this a little bit. Same exact problem with Aurelia the War Leader, but again, we'll have some ways to deal with her not untapping our creatures. And one of those ways is Full Throttle Hero. That will give us 2 extra combats, and it'll make sure that our creatures untap when we use Aurelia or Karlach. And that's it for our extra combat category. Now we're looking at our fog category, which may seem like a weird category to you, but trust me, in a combat deck, you die to the crackback, so you want a few fogs in your deck. Plus, your opponents are never expecting. And that starts out with my favorite fog, Darkness. I actually run this in every black deck I have because your opponents literally never expect Darkness. Then we got Ethereal Haze. This is just another fog. Same thing with Holy Day, just another basic fog. And finally, the best fog of all, Ink Shield. This is the kind of fog that actually saves you after they attempt to get you back in the crackback, because it creates just a lot of creatures. And then we got our next category. We got Haste Enablers. We got Hanwha Battlements here, which will give our creatures haste. Plus, it'll be able to meld with Hanwha Garrison later to be able to make the big threat creature. We'll talk about that when we get there. Then we got Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, Rising of the Day, which also gives our legendary creatures a little bit of an anthem, which is nice, and the absolute OG Anger. That's it for our Haste Enabler category. Now we're looking at our interaction category, starting with Path to Exile, absolute white staple. Same thing with Swords to Plowshares. Chaos Warp, absolute red staple. Freg Boon Novat Guard. Now this is a creature with an attack trigger, which is fantastic for us, and that attack trigger can either get rid of creatures that we need to get rid of, or dome our opponents for a lot, which is fantastic. Then we've got Vats. I know this isn't the best piece of removal, but it is Fallout, it has split second, and it typically gets 1 or 2 creatures whenever you use it. Then we've got one of our 2 actual board wipes. We got Farewell here, and then we've got Ruinous Ultimatum, which of course we got to run because it has Caesar on it. And that's it for our interaction category. Next up, we have our category I'm calling Protection. This has cards like Reconnaissance in here, which give our creatures pseudo vigilance, but it can also be used to pull our creatures out of combat and save them if we need to. Then we got Dolmen Gate, which is protecting our creatures whenever they attack. They won't take any combat damage, which is really good. Got General's Enforcer, which will protect the vast majority of the creatures in our deck, because a lot of them are legendary, and it'll also be able to be incidental graveyard removal, which is useful. Flawless Maneuver is just straight protection. Achroma's Will is actually one of the better cards in the deck, in that it will protect our board, but we can also use it offensively with lifelink and double strike and all that, we'll be able to get a bunch of damage through and gain back a bunch of life if we're hemorrhaging like life points. And finally, we got Freya, Queen of the Valkyries, aka Iroa's Guard of Victory. This will protect our creatures attacking, and it'll give them menace, making them harder to block anyway. Next up, we have a ramp category, and for the first few pieces of this, we'll go through real quick, starting with Soul Ring, of course, Arcane Signet, Boros Signet, Sword of the Animus, Talisman of Conviction, Talisman of Hierarchy, Talisman of Indulgence. And now we get some of the more interesting ramp pieces. We got Captain Lannery Storm here. This is a creature with an attack trigger, and it'll create us 2 treasures whenever we attack if our commander's on board. And then Kellogg Dangerous Minds can do the same thing, and maybe we'll be able to use its activated ability to steal one of our opponent's creatures. I actually want to circle back to Sword of the Animus real quick too. This is also an attack trigger, so we'll be able to get 2 lands whenever we attack. And that's it for our ramp category. Now we got our token production category, starting with Voice of Victory. This is a Grand Abolisher, and it creates some tokens. Then we got Adeline, Resplendent Cathar. This is going to create us 6 tokens whenever we attack if our commander's on. Then we got Anim Pakal, Thousand Moon. This is going to create us some gnomes, which is pretty cool. And now we got Hanwar Garrison. This is going to meld with our Hanwar battlements from earlier, and it'll create us Hanwar the Writhing Township. This will create us a bunch of 3/2s whenever we attack, which is going to be really great. Krenko, 10th Street Kingpin. This is going to be able to get real big real quick and create us a bunch of goblins. Then we've got Zergo Stormrender. This is going to be useful whenever we attack and lose one of our tokens. We'll get some either card draw or opponents will lose life, which is pretty great. Helm of the Host is real cool. We'll be able to create duplicates of some of our really dope legendary creatures and get even more of their attack triggers. Hero Bladehold is going to be able to make our creatures really big with its Battle Cry triggered ability, so it'll be +2 instead of +1. And it'll create creatures for us. Myral, Shield of Argive, is another Grand Abolisher. We're done with our token production category, and now we're into our trigger doubler category. We only have 2 cards here, but we want some redundancy for our commander. Starting with, of course, Firebender Ascension, new card from Avatar. It takes a minute to get going, but we can actually get this down rather early in the game, so that's why it's here mostly. Then we got Windscar Crag. This can create us some creatures if we need them, but it's mostly here as a trigger doubler. And that's it for all of the main categories. I don't typically go over lands unless there's something specific we need to look at, but this is just a Mardu mana base, a typical one, and the link will be in the description, so you'll be able to look at the lands more closely if you need to. So let's look at some honorable mentions, cards that almost got into the deck. So the first card that almost got into the deck was Kratos, God of War. A card I really wanted to put in here for like flavor because Joshua Graham, you know, and religion and all that. But it's also really good for us because we are going to be attacking most of the time, and this will punish our opponents far more than it will punish us. I thought it'd be really cool. Triple red's kind of hard, and I don't know, all creatures have haste, feels like it can backfire pretty bad, but I wanted to mention it in case you want to throw it in your deck. Next is a card I expect a lot of people thought would be in the deck that I didn't add, and that's Sun Titan. I think it's good. I think Sun Titan's a little slow for today's day and age, but I still like Sun Titan, and I want to at least mention it here. Finally, the last card I wanted to look at was Goldspan Dragon. I did want to add this, but I thought we had enough ramp by the end. I didn't feel like we needed Goldspan Dragon, and by the time we're playing this, if we're playing this on curve, it's going to be useful, of course, but it's not as useful as some of the other ramp pieces, so I decided not to add it. And yeah, that's going to do it for our Joshua Graham Birdman deck. I think this is a relatively fun, still Fallout flavored deck that will do some work at some tables. Let me know if you make any changes, let me know if you like the deck, and of course, Moxfield link will be in the description. And that's going to do it for our Joshua Graham video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really like this character, and I really hope that I was able to spread some of my love for this character to you. Let me know what other characters you want me to cover. I'm probably already going to be covering Lisa McLean, but you know, let me know if that's something you really want to see. I might not cover the Ghoul, and I might not cover Maximus, but if you guys really want to see those characters, let me know. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your local Mormon church. Be safe out there, and remember,
We can't expect God to do all the work.